Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I am Tamara Johnson. Sheely, good morning. It is, what's today? Saturday, April 24th, April 24th. Y'all, it is a rainy day in Georgia. It's one of those mornings, y'all, where it took everything in me. It's something about hearing the rain and waking up to the rain. You just don't want to wake up, and it was one of those days. So we are just a couple minutes late. Let me see where my trusty co-host is this morning. Let's see where he is. Good morning,
Good
David.
morning. Good morning, Tamira. How are you?
Oh my gosh, it's a rainy day in Georgia, so you know how I am. It's like, oh, ooh-wee. It took everything in me to get going.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
It's one of those days.
Yeah.
Yeah. Eventful week, David. Eventful week. We had the trial of George Floyd. It was. I held my. I kind of held my breath. I didn't know what to expect with this trial. We've seen this before. We've seen this before where black person, white cop, and the person gets off. And I think everybody was preparing for the worst. You know, Minneapolis was prepared with uh, boarded up windows and the National Guard. They were prepared for rioting. They were prepared. And then the verdict, David.
Well, as somebody pointed out in the commentators, in the last 5 years or so, there have been cops who have been convicted. Not necessarily a first-degree murder, but the officer who shot Laquan McDonald 17 times or whatever it was in Chicago, he was convicted. There have been others. This one seems to have been so much more um, definitive, in some ways. It seems like, but it still really opens up the whole issue of how we're going to deal with public safety, and we really should get into the habit of talking about it not as policing but as public safety. Um, and I really think that there's that it's highlighted how people of color and to some extent even working class European Americans are really hesitant to call the police.
Oh, heck yeah, David. We don't call the cops. That's not what we do. Black people, brown people,
Yeah,
we don't call the cops. That's not, I had an incident where my nephew was followed to my home. And, I told you I live in a predominantly white part of Atlanta.
yeah,
And, the fact that they were, you know, in my yard as if he was, somebody that shouldn't have been here. We don't call the cops. And I told them to get off my property. Get
uh-huh,
off my property.
yeah. And the thing is that particularly in an area like where you live, um, calling the cops on an African American person. I don't know if it was or wasn't, but having
Yeah, he's
them.
black, David.
Yeah. No, I mean
Black.
it's just that those cops are triggered. They are uh, you know they're going to have a hard time treating you as a resident to serve and protect. Much less some interloper. So yeah, I absolutely and we just need to find. There are all sorts of ways I think that are really really smart to address these issues now. Um, and we just
What are the smart ways? What would you what are you saying? These are some smart ways.
Well, one of the things that they're talking about is removing cops from making traffic stops. You know, um, that would, I mean, so many of these incidents, including uh, uh, Dante, what's his name from that Brooklyn Center. So many of these incidents are happening over traffic stops. So just get rid of armed traffic stops. There's enough cameras around to photograph people's license plates. They can be issued summons in the mail, and
And even mental health workers, David. When I hear that, having mental health workers go out with cops, and de-escalate a situation. I saw a video on, someone sent me on here on Facebook, of a young lady who was having a mental health crisis. She was sitting in the middle of the street. The police officers surrounded her, and here comes this woman who was a mental health worker. I'm assuming, but the way she handled it, she made the police get back from the lady who was having the crisis. Don't trigger her. Don't scare her. And this is the kind of way that I think having mental health workers that ride along with officers at all times and on any, because they don't know what they're walking into for the most part. So let's having them with the cops all the time. So that's a smart idea.
That's going to mean the shifting of funding. It's going to mean reducing the funding for armed police officers, and in substituting that for look, there's an academic woman who I heard interviewed on some show, and she just wrote a book. She was a cop. She joined the police department. And good morning, Robbie.
Morning.
And she talked about the training that cops get, and it's pathetic. For the most part, not only do they have this warrior mentality, drilled into them, particularly by their training officers, who tell them, forget about everything you learned at police academy. Out here on the streets, you're in a war. You're in a war zone, and not only do they not get de-escalation training, a couple of hours of it for the most part, but they don't even learn how to shoot straight. They don't even get enough firearms training.
I need them not to just to learn how to shoot straight. I don't want them to shoot to kill. Now, I think that is where we need to make. Why do you have to shoot to kill?
That's a myth. That you can shoot somebody who's moving or agitated and wound them is just that. Forget it. That's just a myth. That you can do that. They are taught to aim for the center body mass, and that's what makes it so wrong. Is that's really the only thing that they can do. So every time they unholster a weapon, there's a potential for death. Because there's no way that you can train somebody to be a super marksman so that they could shoot somebody in a place where they're gonna only wound them.
Hey, Robbie. Good morning. Let's say good morning to Robbie. Good morning, Robbie.
Hey, good morning. I'm listening to both of you. I shared the show. I agree with you, David. The traffic stops are really to me, it just seems like a racket to get money out of people. And we don't seem to, and it's easier, to stop people for traffic than to actually, solve real crimes, not just, looking for something to ticket someone on, basically. And Tamara, your point about shooting to kill, the young lady, on the day that the verdict of George Floyd, the little girl, 15-year-old, obviously there's trauma in communities, especially communities of color, and there are going to be conflicts. And 4 shots in the chest, that is obviously you're shooting to kill someone instead of maybe a taser, or as you said, a shot in the leg to stop someone from chasing or whatever the case. but 4 direct shots in the chest. I saw the video. The whole world has now. He steps out of a car, has no clear understanding. We don't even know what was said over the radio, and just, I don't even know if stop, was said. And from what I saw, a different video, a relative of the 15-year-old young lady, she said that this is someone who was actually reacting because an older person in the home was, taunting her, abusing her. And so she was, to some degree, now on the offense in response. And that's what I mean about community trauma. Mm-hmm. And what really activists and communities and organizations were talking about with Defund the Police were community centers where people could get assistance, reallocation of those funds for assistance for community problems, to not have the escalation instead of just enforcing. Because really our police enforcement is so pitiful that we saw it on the show. Tamara, you had Mr. Coleman, I believe, not last week, but the week before that, who the officer, left one city with a complaint to go join a new city in South Fulton, covered by the chief. So it's kind of a cover up, allowing these kind of problems to get buried in his record. And then he falsified a report, on Mr. Coleman, which was proven. And he still has a job. He's still gainfully employed. He's still being supported. If a citizen falsifies a report on someone, that's a crime. That's a crime. And we know he lied to cover it up, and that's acceptable. That is acceptable in the city of South Fulton under Chief Meadows right now.
Yeah, and that's the issue of the protection that police are providing for each other through the police unions. It's the protection that the Supreme Court has given them through this limited immunity. It's the protections that they have that are way above and beyond what's needed for them to do an effective job. And it's the protections that say that my life, the police officer's life, is worth is worth so much compared to the people that I'm enforcing the law against, that if I even feel threatened, this is the way that cops have gotten off for years. I felt threatened. This is a subjective, if 1 out of 1,000 cases goes to a jury, in most cases the juries have been willing to take that for granted, to accept the police officer's word that he or she felt threatened. We can't have that anymore, and I think that there really is a beginnings of a shift that's taking place, an attitude shift. It's only taken 6 years and dozens of video recorded, on camera incidents that have made it to the news. And who is it that we're really convincing here? It's not people of color. They know the situation already. They're perfectly well aware of it. They have enough community experience to know that this is a shift in attitudes among European Americans. And I don't know if it's going to, there have been shifts in attitudes like this before. And then, there's a mobilization of the white supremacists, to say that anarchy is going to break loose if we don't keep the cops in these as an occupying army.
Good morning, Kamal. We have no volume, no sound. Unmute yourself.
So sorry. Good morning. How are you guys doing?
Good morning. Good morning. Mm-hmm. Community movement builders in the house. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. What's going on over there? We hadn't seen you in quite a while. Welcome back to the broadcast.
I know. I've been running and gunning just like everybody else, trying to do 400 things at the same time. So it's nice to be back. It's good to see all of you guys.
Yeah,
Hey,
welcome back.
Although I think me and Robbie have been keeping in touch more. We keep trying to do work together. So yeah.
For those people who don't know your organization, Kamal, he's out of Pittsburgh in Southwest Atlanta. Can you give a little overview of the work?
Sure. So our organization is called Community Movement Builders. We're a grassroots organization. We work in the area of Southwest Atlanta primarily. We have several chapters across the country, but our home chapter is here in Atlanta. The work we do is our anti-gentrification work and actually anti-police brutality work when it comes to organizing. And we also do what we call sustainable development, which is trying to create cooperatives where we can develop sort of alternative economic structures, while at the same time doing mutual aid work and doing a sustainability fund for folks in the neighborhood to stay in their homes. And so we have a community house that we work out of, a community garden, and we're trying to build a second community house across the street from the one that we have. So that's us in a nutshell.
And you came right on time. I've always been impressed with Kamal's work and their work, because they're really, in the streets. They've led protests, not only on social media, but door to door. And it's been very effective, and ironically ties into this conversation, because they were also trying to assist the police brutality case of Rayshard Brooks, the community movement builders, when the Wendy's on this side of town, when Rayshard was shot in the parking lot as he was running away and killed. And then as a result, the Wendy's in protest somehow winded up burning down. And the idea was that people would use that space as a community center, ironically, exactly in this conversation of what we're talking about. And community movement builders' work was so effective, or is so effective, in the streets, that agency recently, I don't know if you want to share what's been happening, that people are kind of retaliating and using agency, state, city funded agency, to attack, nonprofit anti-gentrification work. Do you want to share a bit about that?
Sure. So, we recently agreed to put what's called a free fridge, which is something happening all over Atlanta, a refrigerator that helps feed folks who are in need of food, whether they're homeless or just in need of sort of access to healthy food. And of all the things I've ever done as an organizer to sort of be radical or to get on people's nerves or to call attention to something, this was sort of the least that I expected some sort of alternative feedback on or some negative opinion on, because we thought this was a simple, we put it in the community park that we are the caretakers of. Folks could come, again, get eggs, bread, pasta, all that kind of stuff, take home and cook. But then we started to get pushback from the very same neighbors who actually would start using the fridge and have used the fridge. They started to push back and became this struggle around whether or not, in their opinion, the fridge was starting to attract what they called criminal elements in the community. Mind you, the people who would come use the fridge were the very people who lived in the community, who would walk there. Well, I guess.
Wait, I'm confused. Like, this sounds crazy. So you have a community refrigerator where you offer food to people. You're feeding people free food they can come and get, and people are pushing back. And I'm
calling the police, calling district council people, reporting that when folks are in the garden working at the community garden, reporting, saying that there's something unsafe going on, calling the police on a nonprofit providing food in a very impoverished area. The poverty rates in Pittsburgh for legacy residents are incredible. That is why they're being harmed so much, because they cannot protect themselves against the gentrification. Go ahead, Kamal. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. And part of this story is that the folks who were calling the police, again, folks who actually had used the fridge on their own for food, who somehow turned against it because they thought it would impact their property values. These were the newer residents who had been in the community. We've had our community house for about 6 years. These residents had been there for about 2 years. It was led by one particular Black woman who got mostly the white neighbors around her to agree that this fridge needed to be moved. And then she's right. So we had meetings with the city council, with the neighborhood association, the parks department, who we hadn't seen in 6 years in terms of that park. We took a park that was right next to our community house that was full of weeds, unused, basically abandoned, and used our own resources to make that park operable, to make it a place where people can get fresh food and free food. They can have plots where we did cooking demonstrations. That very same park department that abandoned that park now came back and started telling us what we, or at least is attempting to tell us what we can do and not do in that park. And at first, the woman who started the fridge, she didn't want to have this fight because she had so many other things going. So she decided that she would just take the fridge out. And we debated about whether or not we thought that would be a good idea. And in some ways, we were like, this is not the hill we're going to die on. We'll fight another battle one day. But as Robbie mentioned, this particular neighbor then decided to start a campaign against us. And so anytime we used the park, she called the police on us. She's called the police twice. She called code enforcement on us about our house. She's tried to make statements about us at the neighborhood association. And then lastly, she contacted NPR local affiliate here, GPA, I'm sorry, and had them do a story on us from her point of view as an admitted gentrifier around the work we were doing. Now, the thing that I want to conclude with about the story is what's, for us, because we're more than just a nonprofit, we are a Black radical organization that works in our community. And there's a history of Black organizations like ours being attacked by police and by state agencies. For her to call the cops on us and to try to make us look like we're a dangerous entity in that community. And I should also say, we did have community support from other neighbors who have recently joined our organization, actually, to continue to support the work that we're doing. That is a very dangerous move. And it's a move that we couldn't let stand. So we've decided to now come back with our own free fridge and actually put it on our property, since we own a community house, and stock that fridge, keep that fridge clean, keep access open for people who need food from the community, and to have that fight. So if they want to have that fight, we're trying to have that fight. So we think that it's important for a working class, poor Black community to have access to free food, to have stabilized rents, to have housing that they can afford to purchase and live there without having to worry about being pushed out of their neighborhoods by people who are basically gentrifiers, who are only concerned with their property value, and then who try to criminalize the very community that's been there 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, upwards of 30 or 40 years, who kept that community going, that we can't let that stand, and we want to fight that fight.
Oh my gosh, I'm floored.
I'm so grateful that Kamal wrote an excellent article about this situation. And it's a classic MO. I have seen this before. When we had the community center, code enforcement was called on us. They came into, claiming we did these, things that we didn't do, with tiny houses, and literally tax-funded agency is being used against its own residents. We pay for that. Right. So, and they're not, and then the defamation in the community, they even come out. What happened with the HOA dues? The membership dues went up to $300 for.
Yeah, we were joined. We decided that we should join as both individuals and an organization, the neighborhood association, at a faster clip that we were already participating in, so that we can have complete access to information that was happening. And originally, the dues were $50 for an organization and approximately $12. Now, of course, we don't agree with any dues, because just by living in a community, you should be able to participate in your neighborhood association. But so we agreed to pay the dues. And then when we got to the next meeting and when we were ready to pay, we were told that the dues for the organization, the organizational rate, had went from $50 to $300. So we paid it, because we want to be a part of it, but we're obviously going to go back and look at the minutes and the board, the bylaws, to see, how something like that should happen and can happen, particularly when a meeting wasn't had in the interim, in which we were told that the actual price was $50 to be a member of the neighborhood association. So that's something else that we also obviously think that, we feel like, we have some allies, but we also feel like folks are choosing what they think is the safe way, the way is which the city side is on, which is to allow these developers to continue to have free access to these poor and working class communities, to build whatever they want to build, to do whatever they want to do, in the name of so-called progress. Again, while slowly and surely neighbors and people in that community are being pushed out. And it's not necessarily, and we will be careful about this because this is not an idea about people who are necessarily homeowners strictly being pushed out. But the vast majority of people in Pittsburgh and these working class neighborhoods are renters. And it's their rents that are being pushed up also. And when they can no longer afford the rent, then they're going to be pushed outside of Atlanta. They won't have access to services, jobs, transportation. And that's one of the real impacts that we don't really talk about as much, because we talk more about homeowners and their values of their homes for what we call legacy residents. But it's also renters who are going to be devastated by what's happening in Pittsburgh and in Southwest Atlanta, where there's no longer going to be any working class communities where people can have affordable rents and live there.
And I'm so grateful this conversation is happening, because this is where people get very confused. So when people say that, you have to understand that a lot of people were attracted to this area due to the Beltline, the investments that were, brought in by federal funding, but that federal funding was allocated off of low income status communities, meaning that the very residents that afforded that funding, that attracted new people to this area, along with the city incentives that had no community benefits, is maligning them. And when we think about displacement, it's a very short-term vision, because those people, whether they're going to Clayco or Henry County or Tri-Cities or whatever the case may be, those costs in affordable housing come to everyone. If I were to send you, in fact, I'll send you a tax record of Pittsburgh, a home in Pittsburgh, which shows a cycle, like a crazy, unsustainable cycle of values, that literally the house goes up, then we have a dip in market, loses all value, sells for nothing, gets foreclosed on, and it happens over and over and over. And what is happening is that our civic engagement, what Kamal is describing, is the neighborhood associations influence the NPU, which influences city council, which is why we don't have community benefits agreements. And instead, we're doing Tyler Perry Studios. We're funding a portion of that. We're doing the stadium, Georgia State, that was city incentivized. We're doing Porsche, city incentivized. And these people have no protections. So ultimately, we pay to help developers get richer, kick our poor people out who fund these federal programs, and winds up paying in a different way as taxpayers more for affordable housing that's apartments. I want you to understand that. And that is because of the civic engagement problem of the monetary dues, because that's where legacy residents, as opposed to newer residents that are recruited in by city council. That's how the tours happen, by the neighborhood associations paying for sponsored tours and lobbying City Hall. So when you understand these pieces and how it all works, that is how Atlanta has gentrified. And the reason I'm so glad Kamal described who was involved is because oftentimes it is, and I'm sorry, I'm going to be very plain about this because it happened in Capitol View. It is a group of white women who are two households with having their husbands support them, who can organize, who put a Black person in front. It is very similar to the demographic and MO of Akeisha Lance Bottoms, and I say this with great respect for her as a person and what she's accomplished, being in charge of Atlanta, but she's just the face of it. That's not the reality. It's very similar to the Chief of Police, Keith Meadows, being a Black person, but allowing fraudulent, continuous systemic problems in enforcement. But people can't see through it because they see the front of it. And it's very strategic because it happened in Capitol View. I was there, I witnessed this, a group of white women and their husbands, and they're putting someone who's Black to run an agenda that it is racist. Because the only people being harmed are poor Black people.
Yeah. Kamal, give us your website and tell us how we can support you.
So our website is communitymovementbuilders.org, and we're on all social media platforms. Obviously, if you're in the audience and you're a Black person, we'd love your support by joining. If you're not Black, we have an affiliate group that folks can also join. We are also in the process. We have a plot across the street, a house plot. We're trying to build our second community house. So we're trying to raise money for that. And if anybody has donations or things, knows of places where we can search out to raise more resources so that we can build that second house, that's really important for us because We want to have workforce housing for organizers. So we want to have spaces where more organizers can move into a community, working class organizers, and help support the infrastructure of building up resistance movements actually to this gentrification, to these community takeovers. And so that's how we use our resources, is to buy more property in these particular communities owned by the organization, that we can have a rent rate that is below market to help sustain folks who want to do community organizing and work with folks in the neighborhood. So that's something that's really important to us.
Give us the website again, Kamal, and where to find you. Say it again.
communitymovementbuilders.org. Our house is 790 Welch Street. It's a community house, so folks are welcome to come by. They can find us Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all at Community Movement Builders. Support us. Please come out and see what you can do to lend a hand.
Yeah. Thank you, Kamal. Please don't stay away as long as you have. We need to stay abreast of what you're doing. And this is heartbreaking that this is happening to the Community Movement Builders, an organization that's specifically designed to help the community. So please don't stay away. Please come back and keep us abreast of what's going on.
Definitely. And a legit one, because there's all kinds of orgs out there, but theirs is legit. They're actually doing the work. And I'm a supporter. I share their stuff. We'll put up the link. We'll put up the article. I've been to the house. It's lovely. It's got a beautiful mural, a beautiful community garden. And organizers need that. Legacy residents cannot absorb this level of attack. It's too much to ask people. And if you don't have an organization like this that's helping people, protecting people to a degree, you can cut off a head. And that's it. It's over.
Yeah.
This is the way to do it. And if you have time, Kamal, just why did Rayshard Brooks' murder inspire the need for a community center and dialogue around that? Because I think that's helpful to some degree. David, you okay?
Yeah, we have our next guest coming up. Go ahead, Kamal. Definitely answer the question.
I'll do it really quickly. Rayshard Brooks is one of obviously hundreds of Black people who've been killed in this country. I think some of the statistics are talking about 1,000 people are killed by the police every year. And so that happened, quote unquote, in our backyard. The Wendy's where his murder took place was less than a mile from our community house. And so we have to continually, when these things happen, understand the role of the police in the community as an occupying force, and one that not only kills our people, but arrests our folks, jails our folks in alarming rates. That this latest conviction, or this not latest, but this conviction that just happened was an anomaly. It was the system trying to protect itself, basically, because it knew of the demonstrations that happened beforehand, and it was scared of the sort of retaliation, that needed retaliation that would happen if this person wasn't convicted. And so this person was, in a sense, sacrificed to allow the system to keep on doing what it's been doing to our people. So we need peace centers, we need organizing centers, we need places where folks can gather and do the work necessary to politicize our community, that we have to take control of every institution and organization that has any say over our lives. Otherwise, that organization will always do damage to our people and our communities.
And on that note, communitymovementbuilders.org. Please go to the website, find them on social media. Please support this organization. They are doing absolutely great work. Thank you, Kamal, and thank you for joining us. Do not stay away. We're going to come look for you if you stay away too long.
Come look, please. Come look. Thank y'all.
Have a good one. Thank you, sir. Oh, David, doing good work in the community and being shut down by gentrifiers. This is crazy. Wait a minute. You're muted. Unmute. There you go. You're not. You're good, David. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have friends who a dozen years ago bought a house in the area just off of blanking out on the name now, where the Westview Cemetery is, and they were experiencing this back in a dozen years ago. They had a community house, and they found that the white gentrifiers were calling the police on legacy residents. They really struggled with that, trying to reconcile the two groups, and they did good work for about a couple of years, and then they just couldn't sustain it anymore. So that whole area over there is probably gentrifying, and
so they eventually just took over. So to hell with the legacy residents, they just eventually took over.
Yeah, I mean it's a real struggle, and there's huge, financial and economic forces that are at work that
Let's
overwhelm it. And
yeah. Let's say good morning to Frank. Good morning, Frank.
Good morning, everybody. Do you like my wallpaper that I've got? I chose for today.
I see you're
Backdrop.
outside in nature.
Yeah, I'm
It's
at
raining
a
here in
event,
Georgia.
a wild food weekend. So we are gathering wild plants and mushrooms and fish and venison, things like that, and learning about living off the land.
Awesome.
Never
You know,
ends.
we David and Nina, I want to welcome you back. This is part 2. Part 1 was last week with David and Nina, where you talked about the Confederacy was a con job on white people and still is. We started at the very end of that. I came in, I could not resist. I came in to you started talking about reparations. So that was totally my lane. And I was like, where are we going? And we started something, and I didn't want us to not take it where it needed to go and have the conversation. But
sounds good.
Yeah, you were talking about white people and bringing those we were talking about Trump supporters. And I shared with you that on my campaign in 2016 that I met a Trump supporter and knocked on his door and had the best conversation with him. And he put my sign next to his Trump sign. So there was an opportunity, I realized then in 2016, before Trump actually became our president, that there was some synergy between Black people and those who are Trump supporters. I don't think we're that far removed from each other. I think the racial divide is part of the plan to keep us divided.
Yep. Oh yeah.
So we start that conversation last week. How do we, make America great, so to speak?
So
did you think about it? Because I did.
So what would you like me to address?
Let's just start there. Making America great. This is where the Trump supporters believe. They're relatively conservative. They understand. They feel like China is a real threat. I can tell you that Black people feel the same way. We see what's happening with China. That there is this big government that we're indebted to as a nation. We see it. It's scary to us too. Those of us who are Black in this country. Trump supporters tend to be a bit conservative. Your family values. We believe in family too. The mother, the father, the strong unit of a family. Right. We believe in family too. So I see some synergy with our Trump supporters, and I think that is where we wanted to take today and kind of flesh that out a bit.
Yes, yeah. So addressing the issue of reparations, which I support reparations. I will say I'm really curious about what kind of strategy and what kind of tactics pro-reparations folks are going to use to get the votes in Congress to do it. Just crunching numbers. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. And just crunching numbers, and my numbers may be out of date, but I think the population in the U.S. is like 13% Black folks. So if all of them are like, yes, we're in favor of these candidates who want reparations, that leaves 87%. You need like a little less than half of them. So what are we? So 13. So you need like 40% of the folks that are left to come around to support reparations. And so I'm wondering what the argument is going to be there, with Hispanic folks, with Asian and Pacific Island folks, and working class white folks and wealthy white folks, and how does the taxation get structured, and how does the distribution get managed, so that you end up with like 52% of the population is putting Congress people in place who are like, yeah, we have to do reparations, and here's the format of we're going to do it. So I don't have any great advice on that. I'm kind of wondering what you think that, because somebody last week in the comments below, they said, reparations will stimulate the economy. And
let's just stay there. It will.
Yeah. And I agree. but a lot of folks would not automatically agree, or they would say, well, reparations to 13% or whatever of the population.
Well, let's stop. Let me help you. Let's
help me understand how
yeah. Let's talk
and I
about
don't
who
need
we
help
are.
understanding the importance of this or why it's a good idea. I'm only asking for help understanding how
The
do you
logistics of it. I get it.
when the Congress says yes, we're doing this, and what is it? What's the shape of it? That's what I'm curious about.
Yeah. So let me give you a little. Let me kind of help you. So first of all, Black. Who actually receives reparations, Frank, is
Right.
those of us who are descendants of slavery in this country. Those of us who are, can trace our lineage back to chattel slavery, in this country. We're
Right.
not a lost people, Frank. We were property, and everybody that's Black in America won't get reparations. A lot of Black are immigrants. They
So can I ask a question? So the folks who are Black but not descendant of chattel slavery, will they support reparations?
And you know what?
If they're feeling like they're being discriminated against, under white supremacy, but they won't get the check.
Well, you know what? They
your reasoning.
Yeah. Let me speak, Frank. Let me speak.
Yeah.
Let me help, because you ask a lot of questions and then you go down a rabbit hole. So stay with me.
No, I'm not going down a rabbit hole. I'm going down like, how do you win? How do you win on this instead of, because we all can feel good writing an opinion piece or making a speech, but like I'm always asking how so when this is over, we can hop in a car and you can drive me to a neighborhood and say, look at these houses. These are homes, families where our work won on this issue and helped these working people. That's what I'm always wondering. How do we get there?
It's one step at a time, Frank. So stay with me. So it's one step at a time. This work.
I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, I know this work was before you and I. Reparations is not a new conversation. John Conyers, and God rest his soul, he introduced this for 30 years before now that it has finally gotten traction. HR 40 has finally passed out of committee. And it's headed to the House floor in Congress for a vote. If we can get it there. So this has been a long journey. Reparations is a conversation that goes all the way back. They go back to Cali House. Back in the 1800s. So this ain't new. This ain't new work. This is finally getting traction. Here in America. So we're here, Frank, prayerfully, you and I both live to see this thing manifest. But if we don't, this is the work that we're actually doing right here and right now. So like going back to parts of your question, like how do we win? I think it's going to take convincing or educating. I won't use the word convincing. Let's say educating those who may have opposition. Anybody that's Black in this country and they oppose those of us who are descendants of slaves getting reparations, that is sad. That is sad because they've been able to come into this country and benefit off the work that my ancestors have done. And they eaten off the fruits of our labor, but they don't want to make sure that those of us who need it the most, those of us who are descendants of slaves who need it the most, aren't given what we need. They may be slave. They may have been descendants of slaves in their own country. There's organizations that are working specifically with the Caribbean to address chattel slavery and to get reparations there. They would need to, that is their home country. That would be where they would be, where they would get their redress is with their home country. But why not support us? So we push back on people like that. We push back those of us who are descendants of slavery. We really push back. And Egberto, who's been on our broadcast, who's a friend of our broadcast, who is Panamanian. It took us a long time to bring him up to speed for him to understand that, as a Panamanian and as a dual citizen here in the United States, you have to support us. You went to our institutions. You may have been able to get, whatever you've gotten based on the fact that you're Black. So we push back and we try to educate them, but we really push back and kind of shame them. How dare you come over here and benefit off of being Black? And those of us who have done this work, descendants of slavery, my ancestors, and then you don't want to support us getting what we need. So we just keep educating, Frank. I think the work for you and David, and I'm gonna stop and let David jump in right here. David has struggled for 40 years with trying to get white people, white working class people to understand that it is a benefit to them to align themselves with those of us who are Black in this country. David, you want to jump in right there?
Well, I'm really conflicted about this this whole issue right now. There are parts of this of the question of reparations that just don't seem to me to have been have been able to reconcile these conflicting interests, and I think it's the main thing that I think is really got to be addressed is the ways in which the system has created a zero-sum game between different groups, and that's well, you see that's these comments that are
David, just
up.
finish your thought. I share comments. I share comments on the screen to keep everybody abreast of, keep the audience engaged with us. Keep talking, David. Unless you don't have anything to say.
No, I mean, I think that that there really has to be a very careful and detailed conversation among people of color, first of all, to reconcile some of these ways in which the ruling elite is institutionalizing the conflicts of interest. And the second point is that even more to the point, even more is of that is the issue of white supremacy and the protection of privilege, protection of racial privilege, which is the historic.
So they'll cut off their nose to despite their face. So what you're saying is that how the saying goes, David? You cut off your nose is despite your face or something like that?
Yes.
So they will continue to be racist. They'll continue to uphold white supremacy at the detriment of this economy, knowing how this would, like I say, stimulate the economy. This is a conversation I have with conservatives and Republicans, knowing reparations would stimulate the economy. I like to talk dollars and cents to my conservatives and my Republicans. These monies won't be put under the mattress as if we're not going to spend it. We're going to spend it. It's going to go right back into this economy. It's going to work. It's going to help tremendously, right? They always talk about lowering their tax burden. They always, let me finish, David, because you didn't want to go. So let me push this train down the track. So they always talk about lowering their tax burden, right? If you get people off some of these social programs that they're locked in, I like to use this example. I saw this on Instagram. If you've heard it, let me repeat it. There was a girl on Instagram who had gotten a $2 and more, $2.12 more an hour raise. She was offered a $2 more an hour raise. She did not take the raise. She could not take the raise. She didn't take the raise, the hourly raise, because she knew that if she had taken it, it would affect her housing.
Yeah,
so she knew I can't make more money
for Medicaid or something. Yeah.
It was gonna affect her in other ways, and so the money wasn't worth it to her. So it was best for her to stay trapped in the system, just so she could have the resources that she needed overall. So this is where we talk to conservatives. This is where we talk to Republicans about having people trapped in these systems that they can't get out of. Black people know what to do. We built communities before. We had a Black Wall Street that was burned down, and we've had it. We know what to do. We know how to build communities. What we don't have is the resources to do it. So reparations will be the resources that we need to uplift ourselves out of these social programs where we're trapped. When it would help America. So going back to David's point, white people would rather be white and racist and stay there versus helping America. So who really wants to make America great?
Yeah, that's what David's saying is true about some white folks. I will say I think that your point about talking to conservatives or Republicans or moderates, whatever you want to describe them, about how paying reparations would reduce their tax burden, I think that's one of the winning arguments. I think you're making a good choice there. That's the argument I used, 30 years ago when I introduced a living wage ordinance to the city council in Durham. There was 13 council members at the time. A third of us were progressive, a third were Republicans, and a third were moderates. And sometimes moderates are moderates because they're just not paying attention. So it's hard to know where they're going to come down. But we didn't have enough votes to get a living wage ordinance that would cover city employees and city contractors. And a lot of the progressives, I was the one taking lead on it because I'd researched the issue and had introduced the whole concept. People didn't know what a living wage was in the 90s. And a lot of my progressive allies were like, oh, Frank, you're doing this wrong, Frank. We just got to make the case that the city should have a living wage to help these people. It's because we're doing it because to help these people. And I'm like, dude, if that argument was going to work, it would have worked a long time ago. That argument doesn't work in this country. The argument I made that ultimately got us the votes to have a living wage was I went to the Chamber of Commerce. I went to the conservative groups. I went to the Republicans and the moderates. And I said, look, you want lower taxes, right? And they're like, yeah, we want lower taxes. Well, the reason you're paying high taxes is because working people show up at work and their pay is so low, they need subsidized housing. They need subsidized transit. They need subsidized healthcare. And that's where your taxes are going to, and food stamps. So when McDonald's pays piddly paychecks to people and they need food stamps and housing and other things, that's why your taxes are high. Mm-hmm. And so if you want lower taxes, you need working people to make better wages. And I started locking up votes of moderates and Republicans, and we had a super majority. But even so, even after winning, I had other progressives mad at me, the guy who came up with it and found the majority of imperfect allies, which is a topic I went on at length last week. Winning coalition has imperfect allies. So I did that. I delivered the victory. I was the leader on this. I wrote the opinion pieces. I went to the meetings with the opposition and got the votes. And still, there were progressives who were mad at me because, Frank, we have to do the living wage to help those people. And now you didn't make the right argument. And I'm like, dude, you're making the losing argument. And I made the winning argument. And who has the paycheck now? And so that's why I think I'm pleased to hear you say that when you talk to conservatives, you have to crack. Not that this is the only facet of this issue that we see, the four of us here, but the issue that they see the most is how will it affect their taxes? And if I could suggest one concrete way to put it so that they would understand it, is that because a lot of them are business people or pro-business, you said, well, let's quantify the money that poor people are going to be getting in tax, housing, transit, food, healthcare over the next, 100 years. And decide instead of parsing that out over 100 years, we're going to take a smaller amount than that and give it to a lot of these poor working people now in advance so that they can build their own lives and buy their own house and have their own vehicle or their own transportation and solve these problems themselves. Republicans can hear that argument. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to say it's about reparations. It's about all these things that they don't agree with you on. You just say, this is a good investment that reduces your tax dollars in the long run by making an investment in advance with working people. That's an argument where you could, not all of them will buy it, but you start building that coalition of imperfect allies until you get to 51% and then you win. And then it doesn't matter what the arguments were used.
Yeah. Robin, you want to jump in?
I don't know. I just feel a little problematic about the whole thing. I think it's helpful, obviously, to have dialogue, hear everyone's opinion, and it's helpful to have allies, or however, I think David uses another phrase. I don't really understand exactly the line of thinking in terms of, if if it was accurate that African Americans are 13% of the country, then that would be 87% of the remainder. So I don't know why the focus was, maybe it was just,
Can I address that? Because other people have the same question.
I'll
Assuming all the black people agree reparations, that's 13%.
Let her finish,
You
Frank.
have to get to
Frank,
51.
Frank,
So
let
you
her
need
finish.
another 37, 38%.
Robbie, Frank, let her finish. Let her finish. Robbie, go ahead.
So if there's 87% remaining, and I actually sent some demographic information, I don't know why it's the initial questions are, how do higher income Black people feel about it? How do Latinos feel about it? To me, reparations is just a very clear cut compensatory damage. There was an injury, there was a personal injury, it's clear, there's a redress, it's a legal argument. It's been done before. It's a matter of, and it's fiscally sound. To both you and Tamara's point, it is also fiscally sound, besides the fact that it was wage theft, which we address in our courts. So not only can we correct it, there's been corrections before for other races, but the majority of people who would have to support it, frankly, are white.
We agree.
Then why?
How do you persuade them?
That's a better question. Then
we agree.
To me, that's on the show for, dear.
That's the question that decides whether reparations happen. Is how do you persuade 51%? It doesn't matter that we agree in this room on the merits of it. That's just how things begin. How do you get 51%? I'm not hearing anybody except Tamara, pardon me if I'm mispronouncing your name, address like, how do we get 51%? Some people will hear the tax argument that she just made. I agree. You have to construct a half a dozen different arguments to get different people to sign on, and then you get 51%, and then you win, and then somebody gets a reparation check. And if you don't get the 51%, nobody gets a check. And you get the same thing we've always had. That's my point. If somebody thinks I'm wrong about how we have to get 51%, just explain how that's wrong. How we win with less than 51%.
What I'm suggesting is that since you and David are in circles and hear things that probably other people of color don't hear, what is the argument against it? Because if we could understand the argument against it, then maybe we could come up with reasons that, okay, that's not accurate, or you feel this way. Well, have you considered this? So who is it that is exactly against it? Is it poor white people? Is it higher income white people? Is it all white people? Who are y'all talking to in these circles that are against it?
The whole point is that I've been trying to make. I mean, I didn't make many comments here about this whole thing, but the more we aggregate, the more we clump together white people, the more that emphasizes their racial interests. All right, and their racial interests, the common interest between people who are working people who are being exploited by other white people, all right, and those people who are their exploiters. The common interest is that they're white and they have racial privilege, and so the more you are appealing to business people. And I'm not saying that all Trump people are business people, but most of them are
pro-business.
And the ones who are the vocal, is that what you said, Frank? I didn't hear.
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Yeah, the vocal ones, the people who are in the Republican Party, the folks who are who I feel, frankly, particularly, I think, Tamara, you're barking up the wrong tree.
What do you mean I'm barking up the wrong tree? What does that mean, David?
Trying to appeal to.
I don't agree with David on that.
I don't either. David, what are you talking about?
I'm saying that.
I understand why he's saying that, but
I don't. Let me be clear, so I'm not. Go ahead, David.
Okay. I mean, it's 2 minutes after the hour. I've been writing things about this. I've been addressing it. There is a class struggle that is going on within European American wing of society. You by appealing directly to business people, you are supporting the wrong side in the class struggle.
I don't give a dang. So let me help you there. I don't give a dang who I need to talk to. I need to talk to Trump supporters. I need to talk
Yes.
to business people.
Yes.
I
That's
appreciate
the winning approach.
it's.
Yes.
You know what? I'm gonna talk to all white people. I'm gonna meet them wherever
Yes.
they are. Frank,
Yes.
I appreciate
Thank you.
when you said, you know, you got to have several arguments. You
Yes.
got to come. You got to meet people wherever they are. And that's the one thing I've learned from being a candidate and being on the campaign trail is that when you listen and you figure out and you meet these people where they are, and that's the conversation you have. I can't solve white supremacy. Black people been saying this, you know, for 400 years. White people don't hear us. I'm not trying to solve that. What I am trying to do, David, is get reparations for those of us who are descendants of chattel slavery in this country and pull us out of the situation we're in, because by 2053, Black America will have zero net wealth. We will be a permanent undercast in this country. We will be a permanent undercast in this country. So on my watch, right here, right now,
statistics, and I just find that's a very, very confusing you know, it just I've read the statistics. It just doesn't compute. You know,
David, are you for reparations?
Yeah, I'm for.
Okay, well then just talk to white people and meet them wherever they are. We're at the top of the hour, David.
And well, you know, okay, all right.
Okay. Thank you, Frank, for joining us on this broadcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
As always.
Yes, this was great. Yes, this is great.
Good luck with all your campaigns.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll definitely have you back, Frank. Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right. Have a good one.
I just would like to see the numbers. Like, if 60% of the country is Caucasian, what are the higher income numbers? What is their argument against reparations? What are the lower income numbers? You know, what is a strategy? You know, and why is it these people are against reparations? And we can actually deal with, hey, you're against it because the truth of the matter is, when white people elevated in wealth creation, Black people de-elevated. You know, when white people gained homes and then used that to send people to school and then got a better home and got jobs, and with social currency, you know, social currency is a huge factor here. People hire who they feel comfortable with. People don't shoot who they're not afraid of. Okay, that has to do with police. That has to do with jobs. People give people a chance, you know, in court when they feel relatable to them. So there's a social currency factor. And frankly, I don't know that Frank is around many poor white people, or you know, he probably is not poor. So I don't know that he knows the argument of these people.
I'm agreeing with you about that. The point that I am making is that the white ruling class in this country has always been willing to sacrifice short-term profits in order to maintain social control. Mm-hmm. They will pay white people more money within certain limits. They will pay white people more money. They will give white people more access to housing, to education, to you know, other social capital, mm-hmm. In order to maintain the differential, in order to maintain the realities of inequality.
Okay, but there are 1% to 9%.
Well, wait a minute. Let me finish, please. In order to maintain the inequality, because that is the way in which they keep their long-term profits and maximize their profits. It's much cheaper to have a mass of white people voting Republican and for lower taxes than it is to have a united working class that's fighting for the interests of working people. As a whole. So as long as you have European Americans who think and act white, working class European Americans who think and act white in the mass, in the vast majority, who are reinforcing one another, whose Trump leadership is bullying them and threatening them into falling into line, otherwise they're race traitors, you know, you're not addressing the issue.
All right, we're at the top of the hour, David. Yeah. You can find Miss Robbie Caban at robbiecaban.com. You can find Mr. David Slavin right here on Facebook at Acknowledge the Divide. You can find me, Tamara Shealy, at tamarashealy.com. And please go to the website and support Georgia HB 541, where we are working and educating those of us who are descendants of slavery here in Georgia on this bill. We're actually out in these political streets here in the state of Georgia. HB541.net. Robbie, David, this is a great broadcast. I will see you guys next week. We were on fire today as usual. Y'all have a great week.
Ciao.
How to the people? Solidarity forever means privileges never.
Have a great week, everybody.
Bye.